and welcome back to another episode of Scale Smart Live. I am your host, Taja M. Graham. I am CEO and founder of Ops IQ, and we are so grateful to have you here this evening to be a part of a conversation that is near and dear to my heart, and that's how we make money. How do we actually make revenue? And we've got a wonderful advisor tonight for you. But before we step into that, a little bit about Ops IQ. If you are one of those growth-minded founders that really is like, I'm ready for the scaling, I'm ready to get to the big dollars, the one thing we need to do is make sure you are actually structurally sound to doing that. And that's where Ops IQ can help. And one of those ways that we do that is both in resources as well as advisory. And the advisory is one of the biggest opportunities. It is a curated C-suite of advisors. If you were to make an investment in this C-suite, 6 individuals to be in your business, you're talking about $3 million plus a year. We give it to you at a fraction of the cost, and you're going to see why. But one of the big things we do is hit on topics that really matter to founders, like capital readiness and how do you get yourself ready to have the conversation with investors, or that you're looking for lending, right? Well, we have in the next 3 months a whole series to help you with that. And it is led by one of our advisors, Omar Ritter, who has been here with us on the show in past. So if you're really considering lending and or investment strategies and how to get yourself ready, Omar is the person. Make sure you sign up. You'll see here a QR code and an ability for you to sign up to be a part of that session over the course of the next 3 months. But tonight, I am thrilled. I'm thrilled for 2 reasons. One, I have one of my dearest of friends that's going to be speaking with us tonight. But 2, I know she is by far one of the experts at getting a return on your marketing and making sure the flow from marketing to actual sales happens. And so I am delighted tonight to have Elissa Blankenship, who is actually one of our advisors within Ops IQ, helping us with sales and marketing. She just came off, literally ran in here as she just finished her first cohort session with us in the platform. So if you hear tonight something that really sparks your ears, lead over to Ops IQ and make sure you sign up to be a part of the next Tuesday's cohort conversation as she continues to build upon how to do that successfully. So Elissa, I am glad to have you here tonight, my friend. Welcome.
Hi, Taja. I'm giving you a hug. It's so nice to see you, and I can't wait to dig into my favorite topics of marketing and ROI. I'm thrilled. Thank you.
So we have a background together. We've spent a lot of time in this area. You've known me as a sales leader and coaching in that arena for a long time. And I've seen you in your wickedness of smartness in this element as well, helping sales leaders and coaches in this arena. So tell us all a little bit more about your background. I don't want to spoil it.
Well, yes. First of all, I'm just so lucky that we had a chance to work together and see each other's leadership styles. You know, building and growing a sales team is a challenge for a lot of leaders. And my first love was marketing. It's where I got my degree, my business degree in marketing, and quickly learned that sales and finding solutions for businesses was my passion. I love sales. But sometimes I would get frustrated with the marketing function and the marketing side of it. And I also got frustrated with the ROI conversations of, in this day and age, and I've said this for 20 years, in this day and age, why aren't we able to measure where our customer is and what they're looking for? So as salespeople, we can effectively meet their needs and shorten the sales cycle and win for everyone. So I've been fortunate to have a background in media and in digital social media. I started 2 businesses that were the loves of my life and had the opportunity to work at a small consulting firm. And now I'm doing fractional sales and marketing. So my career has really taken a big journey. I will say the most important job was being a mom and raising my 2 kids that are now off the payroll, for all of you that know what that means. So I'm super proud of that too.
Awesome. And I'm so grateful again to have you not only here with us tonight, that is the big cherry on top, but working alongside of our growth-minded founders that are within OpsIQ and giving them direction on exactly our title tonight, building revenue clarity through strategy, ROI, and how that looks in the digital execution platform. So as we dig in a little bit here tonight, kind of give us, Elissa, an overarching why this topic, what comes to mind in brief, and then we'll dig into what that means.
I think when you look at businesses that are in that mode of we've just started, we've gotten our first customers, now we're ready to hire salespeople and hire marketing leaders. The biggest challenge is not aligning sales and marketing. The biggest challenge is getting everyone on the same page and then equating every action to, I have spent X amount of money, what return has it provided me? And the smaller company you are, the more important every dollar is. Even if you're a well-funded startup in Series B, C, if you are getting ready to be acquired, or if you're part of a venture capital fund, everyone's looking at every expense. And I read something today on LinkedIn by an executive recruiter that said, business leaders are being asked to do so much more with so much less. And there's really no excuse now for leaders not to be able to clearly measure return on investment. And if they can't measure it, they don't get those budgets. So it's crucially important in early stages to understand how to make marketing and sales work together, because the reason we're all in business is to make some cash.
Absolutely. And this resonates with me, not only, as we look to helping founders that are exposed to OpsIQ, but even as a business owner, personally, I deal with that, right? Is making certain that every dollar, it's almost like a chess game, right? Every move has to be so strategic in making certain that the end goal gets achieved, right? Like you have to masterfully be mindful of the considerations that you are thinking about and how it will make impact to that bottom line, that revenue.
Absolutely. I think that the strategy and the accountability for each dollar and each action is one thing that entrepreneurs and business leaders get really exuberant about and don't necessarily pause, rewind, and take a look at how I want to market. What outcome do I want? How do I want my sales team to act? What assets do I want them to use? And do I understand my customer? And I think all of those things are crucially important. And some of that work's not fun, it's not interesting, but it's critical to ensure that you are doing the right actions, creating the right demand, following up on the customer or prospect in the right way, and pulling them through the sales funnel. It's just, I think it's the most important piece of business before you win a customer.
Yeah. Before we get any further into this, let's layer up a little bit, from the foundation, Elissa, where that founder should start in this journey, from day one. What does that look like? And then that'll help us as we lead into the conversation further.
So, I know we had our 3 questions for what we wanted to cover, and really the answer to the first question is tied into this question as well, which is you really have to start with the math. You really have to start with your revenue math. You need to be able to define your target, your average deal size, your win rate, your sales cycle length. You need to have information about what your pipeline is worth and how people come to find you. You really need to understand who the customer is that you're trying to reach, and you need to intimately know that customer or potential prospect as clearly as you can. You need to know them better than they know themselves, and so does your sales team. And I think that those areas of understanding buyer action, buyer friction, and where they are in the sales process is critical. The other thing I will say that is widely known is that, unfortunately, people don't always want to talk to salespeople, and especially in the business-to-business environment, about 90% of buyers are doing most of their work online or asking people or reading articles before they ever call a salesperson. So starting with a very strong foundation of ensuring that you are clear about the customer that you want to reach. You're clear about how you're going to measure that potential customer, but you're also crystal clear on how you show up before you even begin talking to them. It's the web is your digital front door, and so make sure it's welcoming.
Absolutely. So let's dig a little further in this about the flow, right? Like you talked about, the areas that they should be focused in, knowing and understanding who your client is, who that ideal customer profile is, and then how do they go through their journey, and how does that look as they're looking for you in their research? What are other patterns or flows that you would recommend, and how does that look amongst your tech stack or the platforms that you would use? What would be those things that you would say really help that flow to exist?
So I think it's important to start with, a plan is designed around how revenue moves through the business, not how departments or marketing channels are working. And so the first most important thing is you need to understand how business and revenue flows through your business. So starting with revenue map, like I mentioned before, is the first point. And the second is really mapping your buyer's journey. What you want to know are things, what you want that customer to do when they engage with you and how you are scoring that particular action. So for example, if you're a business that says, if someone books a demo with us and they meet with Elissa, we have a 25% chance of winning that business. There are a few data points that you're looking at with that. You're looking at how effective the demo is, how effective Elissa as a salesperson is, and how many demos she needs to create to win that average business. So one of the most important things is, what are you trying to move the buyer towards where you can begin to measure that action? So it might be a consultation, it might be a demo, it might be a trial, it might be something related to renewal or expansion in business. So you really need to map the journey. The next thing that I really encourage businesses to do, and I don't think this happens as often as I would like, is that you've got to have an SLA or a service level agreement between marketing and sales.
Mm.
And that's to start with a common language, meaning if you are defining things differently in an organization, you have to be very transparent. I think marketing and sales are two businesses that love an acronym, right? I mean, we're as bad as the government, where, an acronym is something that delights us and we like to use different acronyms, but creating a common language to say, how are we going to communicate and measure success from a marketing perspective and a sales perspective is incredibly important. And what an SLA might look like is you sitting down with marketing and sales and saying, what are we delivering? How quickly does the customer get it? How are we measuring it? What happens if the customer standards aren't met? And then from that, marketing and sales can typically look at things like, what's a marketing qualified lead or an MQL? What's the data that the salesperson has to have before that's handed off? What's the maximum response time by sales? What's the expectation by sales once they get a warm MQL? How many times should they follow up, and in what way should they follow up to that prospect? And then how are those actions reported, and how are those expectations tracked? And that's all really crucial data within your tech stack. Your tech stack should work on the marketing and sales side, but this goes to the next challenge, which is marketing has tracking and sales has tracking, and sometimes they're not on the same page. So shared definitions has got to be the number one piece, and your pipeline stages and your pipeline definitions have got to be aligned with sales and marketing, or marketing is talking about one thing, sales is talking about another thing, and you just are ships in the night. And your tech stack should absolutely be able to measure not only actions or dark actions before a prospect actually does a form fill or does an action, all the way through closed won or closed lost activity. So really, really critical. So that's how I would look at it, is that every marketing and sales system has to have a framework and a common language to begin with, and everyone needs to be on the same page.
Oh, that's awesome. So we've got a question here. How do you define the MQL? What does that mean?
So in sales and marketing, there are terms that we use. This is one of my favorite. An MQL is called a marketing qualified lead. And organizations measure a marketing qualified lead in a few different ways. So when you look at tracking tools, I'm going to use HubSpot as an example because I have the most experience working in the HubSpot tech stack and I really like it. It's simple to use. So on the marketing side of HubSpot, you have the ability to track activities that either a dark user, and I consider a dark user somebody where they haven't done a form fill, but perhaps they're consuming some of the content that's on your website or some of your other assets that you have tracked within the system so that you can follow what they're looking at and what they're reading. The other information that you can track on HubSpot from a sales side is marketing communication that goes out from your sales team to a potential prospect. So a marketing qualified lead is different based on what type of business you're in and how you determine if that person is ready to speak to a salesperson. Typically, an MQL is somebody who has taken several steps within the initial sales process and raised their hand saying, I would like to talk to a salesperson now. Now, they're not actually going to raise their hand and say, please have sales call me, but that may look like, I'd like a demo, I'd like more pricing information. And so different organizations measure MQLs in different ways. So that's a marketing qualified lead as far as this person has been identified as someone that we as an organization can market to. They become an SQL when it's passed off to the sales team. And that means I'm ready for the salesperson to reach out to me directly. But marketing's responsibility is really to track those actions so they know, should I continue to market to this person? Should I market to this person in a different way? Should I market to the buying committee in a different way than I market to the actual person purchasing the product? So it's all of those actions that take place that say to the marketer, this person wants to communicate with us because they may be researching a solution. That's MQL. And just to recap, SQL is they have raised their hand in some way or given a trigger that says sales needs to reach out to them because they've created, there's a buying signal associated with it.
Yeah. I want to ask this question because, it sounds like this is perhaps at times when you bring in that agreement, it's because you're dealing with a defined internal team. How do you see it, Elissa, play out when both of the functions, both marketing and sales, are external functions that you have resourced? How would you advise that founder to bring those two entities when they are two separate houses together in alignment for that?
So this is going to be probably a controversial statement. I believe that number one, the sales leader, if they do not have a strong marketing counterpart, should own the marketing and sales function.
Ooh.
If you do have a strong counterpart, then I think it needs to be explicit that marketing is the first step in the sales process. So I believe that marketing is part of the sales process, not a separate entity. And to answer the question of how to manage it or navigate it when there are two different departments or two different objectives, you have to have a really strong CMO or CEO leader that's giving very clear instructions on what the true function of marketing is. And my belief is the function of marketing is to create demand, awareness, interest, education, assets for salespeople, so that when that opportunity comes, it's easy for the salesperson to qualify or disqualify that prospect, even though marketing probably should have done that ahead of time. But if they haven't, if the salesperson can qualify and say, this isn't part of our ideal customer profile, we shouldn't even be wasting our time with them, or this is a great opportunity, this is my next step. I believe you need to have a really strong leader that understands the true function of marketing and who owns what lane and responsibility. And the bottom line is marketing really is the first step in the sales process. So even before you identify who you want to call on, it's marketing's job to do sales. Now, some people don't agree with that, but that's always been my belief.
Yeah. And this might be on our next topic, but because I didn't really capture it, but here's my next question. It's not. So I'm going to ask the question next. What happens when we do have this disconnect? When there is not that alignment, right? That either marketing is overpromised, right? Or that sales misaligned, or operationally, we have dysfunction. What would you say happens here?
It happens all the time in so many businesses. I think that one of the conversations I've had with CEOs when I go in, because I've run marketing functions, I've run sales functions, I've run both together. Marketing and sales alignment is a huge pain point for a lot of CEOs. And I think that it's because you're not using math in sales and marketing properly. And what I mean by that is that in today's age, in 2026, there is absolutely zero reason why you can't. It's not always easy, but you should be able to track attribution at some point, where that customer came from and how they went through the buyer's journey to either close win or close up to a close won or close lost. And attribution's hard and it's challenging math, but I think that leaders don't sit down and say, if we're going to spend X amount of money, what does our ROI look like? ROI, for those of you who aren't sure what that term is, ROI is return on investment. It's the financial return that you get when you spend money, what you're getting from it. And one of the reasons why marketing budgets are cut so often and so early in organizations is because marketing hasn't done a good job of explaining attribution and where ROI comes from. And sales wants to blame marketing and marketing wants to blame sales. So how do you bridge the gap? Everybody gets crystal clear on what are the metrics we're going to measure. What are we always going to measure? What are the ones that are going to move the needle? And how are we going to course correct if we can't find the information, we don't understand the information? What are we going to do operationally, internally to solve that? Because if you don't know your numbers, you're going to constantly spend money and wonder where it came from. So, ROI is the big friction point in marketing. It's the big friction point in sales, not as much. But marketing, absolutely. And that's probably because activity is easier than accountability, right? It's easier to say, I got 10 clicks or these are my vanity metrics of the marketing team. And listen, I was a marketer for a long time, so I'm not beating up the marketing side, but the vanity metrics that people are looking at today are not the ones that always drive an action. And it's one of the biggest disconnects with ad agencies and with marketing teams is that they really, really struggle with what's the ROI. And if you can't track it, it's like one of my first bosses said, what gets measured gets done. And if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. And I just think we as a marketing and sales community have got to get better at doing the math.
Yeah. Keywords that I heard there, accountability and the transparency to it, right? Absolutely. Utilizing your systems, especially your HubSpots, it allows for there not to be any bias as to what is really happening, right? And when you look at it in the numbers, that is what it becomes, especially when you can get past the vanity numbers that you just expressed. I love that. That is very key. I thought I saw
Taja, you were a sales leader, so you know that if you have a sit down or a one-to-one with a salesperson and you have the numbers there and you can see there's activity but there's not success, if you're a strong sales leader like you are and were, you can hold them accountable to an expectation that isn't related to activity, because activity is just activity, right? It's not. So connecting it to how many appointments did you set, and each stage in the pipeline and the sales process takes the conversation of it makes sales managers stronger. It makes salespeople better. It helps you get rid of that bottom sales group that you probably shouldn't have and hire better salespeople when, as a manager, you're using numbers to hold them accountable. It just makes everyone's job easier, I think.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. You know that. Absolutely. Yeah. So, David, I thank you. I saw a question from David in our chat box here. If we can bring that back up. What is attribution? So why is it so hard? What's your multi-attribution model look like? Ooh, that's a good question.
That's a great question. Attribution is incredibly hard. It's hard for a lot of reasons. And one of them is because the buyer's journey is digital first frequently in most products. And so it makes measurement a little bit more complex, but that's not really an excuse, but I understand why it's difficult. So the question is, what is an attribution framework? I think the first step in looking at your attribution framework is taking a look at your tech stack and your systems and asking really strong questions about what are we measuring, how are we measuring it, and where are the dead zones or drop zones, or where is the action that's happening without us having a measurement. That, one of the industries that is historically challenged in this area is healthcare, where they have a system for your email, they have a system for an appointment, but you can't book an appointment. But if you do book an appointment, then someone calls or you have to call them. And so if you have disconnected or disjointed systems that don't speak to each other, that's a foundational problem in looking at attribution. The other challenge with kind of attribution in general is that it's really challenging sometimes to determine if someone looked at an article, downloaded a story, had 3 or 4 actions that from a marketing perspective they would determine as a success. Which one do we attribute it to? And so there's some ambiguity, I think, in the marketing world that says we brought these 500 people and they had 3 actions, but every action isn't created equal. And so that's where you look at lead scoring and action scoring and really create these funnels so that you have the ability to understand the prospect so well that you know that if you provide information A, then information B, then information C, then information D, that once they get to D, they're more likely to make choice A or choice B. You begin to understand the process of truly the buying pattern and how they're going to interact with sales. But that, again, takes time and tracking friction points within the process and really honest conversations about how your customers are buying. And then just the big answer is that attribution models can be very simple, but they also can be really complex depending on the industry. I think what I'm going to do is write an article on different attribution models, and I want to provide some more detail in that. I didn't mean to give sort of a vanilla answer, but attribution is complex, but we should be able to do it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll be looking for that article.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's go back to that ROI and the return on investment. People get butt puckered, especially in the organization when you talk about those expectations of ROI, right? So how should leadership, the CEO show up in those accountabilities, holding people accountable to the return on investment, but yet not stifle what is innovation and ability to deliver in that space?
Well, I think one of my favorite quotes is ROI is not a marketing metric, it's a business metric, right? You have to look at it from a business perspective. You also have to be willing to understand that marketing is not an exact science. There's an art, absolutely an art to marketing. And so one of the things that we really need to look at is that don't discount the value of A/B testing. There's going to be a certain percentage of your dollars that you may attribute to that didn't work, and that's okay. I think an organization has to be comfortable with every single dollar that's spent may not lead towards a closed one. I mean, that's not really realistic. If somebody could come up with that formula, please let me know because I want to stop working. But the truth is that you have to have some flexibility within your marketing and your sales to test different tactics and determine what works and what doesn't. And I think this gets back to business 101, which is communication, clarity, expectations, clearly articulating this is where we want to go, this is what we want to accomplish, this is everyone's lane and their responsibility, and then together this is the expectation for how we're going to work together and how we're going to measure it in a non-punitive way. I mean, salespeople, I always laugh and say salespeople are the only people that every action is scrutinized, and no one else's action is scrutinized more than a salesperson, right? And we really need to start not scrutinizing, but looking at how the actions across organizations are measured, what adds value and what doesn't. So I think ROI has to be a bigger conversation outside of sales and marketing, personally, because organizations really are leaking, they're leaky buckets. They're losing a good bit of business because they just don't know where they're losing money. So hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah, I think absolutely. So you've actually had several startups yourself, right? In the digital space, you know, as you being that founder, what are points did you realize strategy alone wasn't enough? That you had to be relying on systems that you had in place to help you in that shifting. What did that look like for you?
So, the whole digital footprint and how it impacts your business, I cannot be underscored. That is where we all are. We carry our phones with us everywhere. We're doing research. AI is answering questions for us. The language learning models. When we're driving and we say, "Tell me where the closest Vietnamese food is closest to me." All of these engines are informing us of decisions and purchases, and so I think that what we have to do first as business owners, especially in the B2B space, is recognize that many people are getting information again before they're ever talking to a salesperson. So the question is, are you going to be one of the businesses that shows up? And your digital footprint is absolutely your calling card for your subject matter expertise in an area. And so that's really part of the early buying journey. And the reason that's important is because it shapes trust, right? People do business with people they know, like, and trust, and that are referred by other people. I think that's an important addition. If you said to me, "Elissa, you need to call this person because they'd be great at solving this problem," wouldn't I would hire them right away because I trust you. I trust you. And if you said this is the right person, I wouldn't. I would do my own vetting, but that would go a long way. And so I think we have to use that lens when we're trying to sell to people or trying to market to people, that they're doing a lot of that information online. So they are looking at online reviews to see what other people said. They're looking at how businesses respond to online reviews, which is really a delightful thing for me to look at. They're looking at how that business shows up, how often that business shows up, if that business wants to have a conversation with customers, if that business anticipates the questions that need to be answered before they talk to a salesperson. So all of that's really important with shaping trust. But it also, when you go to a website that looks like it was created when the interweb started, right? You automatically have this perspective of, these people, I don't know whether I trust these people or not. So just how your site performs, the user experience, the clarity of call to action. I mean, I don't know how many really high-end websites I've gone to where I'm like, I just want to get a phone number to call someone, and you can't find a phone number. And so I think that the user experience is really critical. I think it also affects your speed to revenue. If you can find those solutions to answer customers' questions in a clear, transparent way, and transition that into, we'll have somebody call you and reach out to you when you're ready, I think that's when it's really, really critical. And whenever I started my second digital business, which was really a roll up of my first, where we started managing social media, all that was really focused on long form blogs and social media, and social media is very different today. So we could spend 2 hours talking about, should you be on every social media platform, and what's the most important one for you to look at? And I mean, that could be a 2-year conversation. But the truth is you have to show up online. You have to invest a budget to understand where your buyers are online, and you need to have some sort of tech stack to track your customers. And that's what all the cookies and all of that's for. Everybody expects to be tracked, unfortunately. And that's where the opportunity is, I think.
Yeah, and you've hit on a very valid point. Your digital footprint really does have a quiet influence in your revenue. I mean, you want to pull in a little bit more on that, but founders need to realize that, right? Like you have to, and you alluded to it. Be selective in what of the social platforms that will be expressed best for your business. Talk a little bit more about how that really, going from that social content and delivery, how that really can pull into the revenue side of things. Where should a founder be seeing that or recognizing it in the process?
I think this goes back to the webinar that I just did on ideal customer profile, and that you really have to understand your buyer. And then one of the conversations we had is that so many complex sales now have buying committees, larger enterprise deals. There is not one buyer. You typically have a buying committee, and you don't always know who all of those people are that are influencing a sale or purchase. But what I can promise you is, even if you don't know the IT person that has to approve this purchase that you're selling at an enterprise level, they are reading about your company. They are reading about solutions. They are vetting you. And so having the ability to answer and validate and create a trusted partnership with dark users, meaning people that you don't know are either influence of the process or don't want to opt out because they don't want to be called by a salesperson, that's critical. It absolutely affects conversion. It affects your speed to revenue and the cost to acquire a customer. But the other thing to remember is it's not just digital. You do have to remember that throughout the buying committee, people receive information about buying certain products and services differently. That's why there's still conferences. That's why there's still trade journals. That's why there's still, albeit, it's diminishing significantly, but that's why there's still newspapers and online, is that you have to know where your buyer and your buying committee are consuming information to make that decision. And you have to be really targeted about it, which means getting back to sales and marketing 101, you have to intimately understand your prospect, the pain points, what's keeping them up at night, why they would or wouldn't do business with you. And you have to clearly articulate that consistently online. And that's why social media, is important. It's certainly not the most important platform, but social is search. And in the AI world, when you try and Google something now, it gives you AI answers first. So you really have to be prepared for that engine to work. And I think that there are a lot of industries that are just lagging behind because the digital adoption has just changed so quickly. And it is a challenge. So finding somebody that understands the marketing mix of your ideal customer and the allocation you need to allocate to reach them before the sale happens, and then supporting salespeople with sales enablement content that's going to pull the sale through, are all really, really important functions of sales and marketing. And most of them are digital, but certainly not all.
That is I appreciate that point because that is very helpful as you consider the various places that make sense for finding those silent streams of revenue, where it comes from. So, I might have a founder on watching us right now that says, this is great. We're growing revenue and it's looking good, but it feels messy. It just feels like it's just all over the place and I can't really get my arms wrapped around it. What would be the alignment checks that you, as we look to close out the show, what are those alignment checks, be it in marketing, in the actual sales, in operations overall? Where would you suggest they go to get that alignment?
So CEO founders are the most beautiful group of people because they had a vision and they believed in it, and they got people along the way to invest time and money and energy in their lives to help build this dream of this founder investor. So and CEO, and what I would say first is that founder CEO that's moving their business from 500,000 to $1 million, and then $1 million to 2 and 2 to 5. The first thing that they need to recognize is that the skill sets and the talents that you have as a leader and a founder are limited potentially to the service that you provide or your area of expertise. And you may not be an expert in all of those areas of the business. So I think that's just number one. Let's be honest about that's the reality of being a founder. Recognize what you know and don't know, number one. Number two, communication is really crucial. I don't believe that any employee, whether they're in sales, marketing, operations, HR, wants to do a bad job. People want to do a good job. They want to work hard, especially if they're working for a small business. So that's my belief, maybe Pollyanna, but I really do think most people want to do a good job. Where it falls apart is when you have a CEO or a leader who isn't clear about this is the outcome that we want, These are the steps that we need to take to accomplish that outcome. These are the times and benchmarks and how we're going to measure them and what I expect from you. And then those uncomfortable conversations of holding people accountable when perhaps the result isn't what they wanted, and being a strong enough leader to say, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I need to reach out to someone to help me with this. And that's tough. When you're scaling a business, you don't have the money to hire, a $250,000 VP of sales and a $250,000 marketing person. And sometimes, you hire those people and they do a lot of stuff. And it's like, that's not what I needed at this stage in the business. So I think knowing yourself as a founder, I think if it feels messy, it is, because people don't know what you're expecting. And I think you have to drill it down to 1 or 2 or 3 metrics. You have to be really crystal clear. We're only going to measure these metrics, and the metrics that you choose need to be ones that help you accomplish the outcome you want. So if the metric that you're measuring is that we know if we get 10 appointments and sell 5 deals, and we're pitching those deals that are $500,000 or more, that we're going to hit our revenue target next quarter, you've got to quantify it. This is not the time to be nebulous or wishy-washy, and then stick with it. Don't, as founders and CEOs, and I was so guilty of this, that when I started to see that something wasn't working, I wanted to throw it out and let's start something else. But that creates chaos. It's hard for your team. So really spend time building that framework and communicating expectations, holding people accountable and measuring, and then course correct as you need to. And so I think that is one of the biggest areas where it's just the messy middle, and it's hard. The other thing, I've met with VPs of sales and CMOs, and I've met, and if you put them both in a room and you ask them, what do you think your job is? What's your number one responsibility? And if they're not clear on it, which happens at really large companies and mid-sized companies and small companies, but it happens a lot in larger companies, it would surprise you. There's so lack of alignment because they're not invited to the big meetings, but given responsibilities to do things that they didn't even know that was what they were responsible for. They're given too many metrics. They're expected to do too much with not enough resources. And so I think CEOs, founders, CEOs all have to take a reality check and really drill down to clarity metrics, 1, 2, or 3, that are going to help you achieve the outcome in quarter 3, quarter 4, in the next 1 to 3 years. You have to have somebody that has the nimble ability to do that. And that's the responsibility of the leader. And if the leader can't do that or doesn't have the skill set, then that's a beautiful time to ask advisors to come in and specifically help with those metrics. Because what you measure gets done or it doesn't. And if you don't put metrics to it, you're just going to continue to be frustrated.
Yeah. I have so appreciated our conversation today, my friend. I hope that those that are listening and seeing this really find those alignments. I heard clearly, we have to be very definitive in what our expectation is. The accountabilities and the transparencies wrapped around that, be it in our tech stack, be it just in the conversations, that alignment and the agreement in that. But more importantly, that every function, be it marketing and or sales, has responsibilities to the revenue, and that has to be paramount, that everyone needs to understand they play a role to the revenue. I didn't say marketing to sales necessarily, but it's the revenue, right? And being able to define both what is that marketing lead to the sales lead is how that can be identified. So thank you, Elissa Blankenship, for being on the Scale Smart live show tonight with us. Like I said, if you heard something tonight and you're like, oh, I really needed to hear more from her, one, follow her on LinkedIn and socials, because she definitely is a thought leader in that space. More importantly, go to opsiq.biz and sign in and find out how you can be a part of her current cohort series and future engagements that she will be doing as a part of our advisory team. So we're glad to have you here tonight with us, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for another episode. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tasha. Bye.